Welcome back, everybody. Let's go ahead and get into section number three. With section three of today, we're talking about the ghettoization of Polish Jews. So, what we'll primarily be talking about is the establishment of the ghettos in Poland and what experiences were like in the ghettos. So, identifying Jews in Poland, we have to set that up first. If you remember last time, we talked about the Nuremberg laws that established that if you had at least three Jewish grandparents, you yourself were considered a Jew. Well, it's different in Poland. Instead of looking at the grandparents, they look at the parents. If one is Jewish, you are considered Jewish, which is a lot stricter than what the Nuremberg laws were that we talked about in Germany. Now, it's important to understand Germans did not know what to do. The final solution, the extermination of the Jews, is not going to come until 1941. But they did work to separate the Jews from the general population. So it's logical extensions of what they had already been thinking. Now, there were some plans that had been thought out and they'd started to work on, but they're not going to come to fruition. There was a Jewish reservation that would have been established in the East, probably in the Soviet Union. The Madagascar plan shipped them off to the French controlled colony island of Madagascar. And all plans were considered valid as long as they destroyed Jewish life. Well, the ghettos is going to be the one that's most popular in 1939 and 1940. It's also going to be deadly for hundreds of thousands of people. It did undermine ties between people, but also did bring people closer together. And there are a lot of primary sources that survive the ghettos. So there's a lot of primary experiences for us to go and explore. It's also important to understand people could take bus tours of the ghettos and like basically treat it like tourists going through a zoo. Let that sink in for a moment. So we're going to talk about one specifically. This is Los. This is in Poland. This is one of the largest ghettos. It'll be sealed off in April of 1940 and be inhabited by Jewish people until August 1944, when the ghetto will be emptied and everybody remaining will be sent to Auschwitz. Conditions there were not great. It was overcrowded, with an average of 7 people per one room. Now, by 1940, the total population of this ghetto was 223,000 that were crammed into only about 30,000 apartments. Only about 700 of those apartments had running water, and even less had electricity. This ghetto was established in one of the poorest portions of the city, so conditions were not great to begin with. Now, Los was known for their textiles, and a lot of times in the ghettos, we're going to see people establish systems of survival through work. The city had also been marked for Germanization, or making it more German. The ghetto was completely walled off and further isolated. Food was extremely scarce. Even potato peels were considered to be delicacies. And people are going to continue to die due to poor conditions. About 6,000 people will die in 1940, 11,000 in 1941, and 18,000 in 1942, to give you a context of the next 3 years. The ghettos are also going to be considered repositories for people considered to be human trash. Jewish people from all over Europe, including Austria and Czechoslovakia, will be sent there, as well as Roma, who will be sent there. They were also sent to ghettos in Warsaw and Lublin. Now, within the ghettos, there was actually strong systems of government ran by Jewish leaders of the community. These are, well, we'll come to that in a second, but we're going to hear about some experiences in the ghetto first. So, we don't know who said this, but they went on to say there is no justice in the world, not to mention in the ghetto. Right now, they are deporting people on welfare. People are in a state of panic, and this hunger, a struggle against death from starvation. Life is terrible, living conditions are abominable, and there is no food. So consider the following. What is their tone? What is the situation they are describing? And after reading this, what do you think the ghettos were really like? Take a few minutes, look this over with your table partners. We'll discuss this as a class in 5 minutes. So, in the ghettos, there's the Jewish councils. These are groups set up by Nazis to run day-to-day life in the ghettos. They distributed what supplies they had. There was also a precedent for this. Most Jewish communities had Jewish councils known as Kehlats, and they're going to be heavily resented for enforcing Nazi rule. they also had a lot of tough decisions to make. It was either they were cooperated, or if they refused, they'd be killed and be replaced by somebody who's considered to be more compliant. They'll be criticized for collaborating, and they did what they thought was right. They thought by being productive and producing goods would make them safe at the cost of abandoning those who could not work, meaning the elderly, the disabled, and children. Also within these communities is the Jewish police. German presence in the ghettos was actually pretty limited. They utilized the Jewish police who reported to the councils. They are forced to round people up, and they're also going to be hated by people like the Jewish councils. Some did work with resistance movements and provided crucial intelligence. In the Kovno, the Jewish police there actually helped smuggle thousands of children out and a bunch of weapons in. When they were arrested, they kept their mouths shut, did not name any names, and were executed, but they did not give anybody up. There's a lot of records that they left letting us know this story. So, stepping back from the ghettos, we have to talk about Jewish Christian relations in Poland. It's important to understand half of the Jews murdered during the Holocaust were Polish. And this remains a highly emotional topic for them, with multiple theories explaining how we should address Poland. There's the arch anti Semites theory that said that Poles were even more hostile to the Jews than Germans, saying that it was essential for the Polish people to be anti Semitic for the Holocaust to happen. This theory does overlook the situation of all Polish people under Nazi rule because, well, they were all under Nazi control. It also ignores the fact that the Netherlands would also have a high percentage of Jews killed as well, but no anti Semitism to measure there. There's also the all Poles were victims theory that claims that the Poles did all they could for their Jewish neighbors given their circumstances. Well, this downplays Jewish victimization. Then there's the final one, the unequal victims approach, saying that they were Polish Christians and Polish Jews were attacked by the Nazis, just to different extents. 3 million non Jewish Poles were actually going to be killed by the Germans and the Soviets. So this equates to around 10% of the non Jewish Polish population. By the end of the Holocaust, 3 million Jews from Poland were killed by the Nazis. This is 90% of the Jewish population in Poland. This approach has validity, but it creates a competition of suffering to basically determine who had it worse. So there isn't really a strong system to look at this beyond it was a bad situation for everybody. So some features of the Polish situation that we have to talk about are things like chronology. Poland's going to be under German control from 1939 until 1945. That is longer than pretty much any other country in Europe. So they were broken down by years of abuse, and compared to places like Italy, who were only occupied starting in 1943 until the end of the war, they endured a lot. Ideological things we have to talk about. Nazi racial theory described the Poles as inferior. So non-Jewish Poles were viewed better than Jews, but not by much. And they were there to allegedly serve their German masters, so nobody was having a good situation here. Demography. There was an ethnic division in Poland. Many people living in Poland in 1939 were not ethnic Poles. And relations among these groups were tense. This included groups like the Ukrainians, Belarusians, Russians, and Jews. And then poverty. It served as a motivator for non-Jews to help the Nazis. In some instances, they would hunt down Jews for bags of salt and sugar. Let that sink in for a second. They hunted people for bags of salt and sugar. Now, most of the people in Poland were ordinary people with familiar motivations. They were trying to do what they could to survive, but they made some awful choices along the way. Now, one of the things we have to talk about is the Zagota, a council for aid to Jews. They provided aid for Jewish people all over Poland. Food, medication. They forged many documents and got tons of people out. Poland does have the highest number of Jews killed, but it also has the highest number of non-Jews who saved Jewish people. So that's a big thing to keep in mind with this. So, wrapping up today. Today, we learned how the Germans invaded Poland, what life was like during the occupation of Poland, and, well, what the conditions in the ghettos and institutions that functioned within them. We also learned that the invasion and occupation were complex and had many things happen to the people who lived there. Try and keep that in mind as we continue to go through this journey of exploring the Holocaust. So, your final assessment, just like the last two lessons, is a reflection question. You're going to write a 5 sentence response to the following prompt, citing evidence from today's lecture and activities in your response. So, what is something interesting that you learned today? Did it change your mind on something that you had thought previously? If given the opportunity to explore this topic more, what would you like to study? So, that is it for today. I will see you all next time. Bye, everybody.